I'm Shalina Tobin, aka Posh Nosh Gal, and I'm joined by the very talented pastry chef Damien Wager. Damien is nothing short of a phenomenon. Over the past 2 years, he shot to fame as one of the UK's best pastry chefs. He was nominated Young Chef of the Year in the prestigious 2018 Restaurant Awards, and the following year he created the company Edible Art Patisserie and launched his first book, which is already a bestseller worldwide. Even more impressive is that he's completely self-taught. Hi Damien, thanks for joining us. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you. Yourself?
Yeah, I'm doing really well, thank you. So Damien, you studied PE. You were a PE teacher. How did you get into the world of edible art?
Well, so I went to college and university to obviously become a PE teacher, sort of secondary school level. But obviously, when you study in this country, you want to try and make some money, obviously on the side as well. It's not cheap. So I actually started washing dishes when I was in college, and then between the start of the college course up to the end of basically degree in university, I actually managed to rise from pot wash up to like a senior chef de partie. Wow. And maybe my priorities were wrong, but I worked out quite soon that after I finished my degree, I was actually earning more money as a chef than what I would do as a teacher. Wow. That's obviously, I don't know if that's a sign of how well chefs are paid or how badly teachers are paid, but either way, I fell in love with the industry anyway. So my decision was made halfway through my university degree, but I thought I wanted to finish it anyway, so there was no point quitting. So I just carried on with what I was doing, really.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it worked out for you, so clearly a brilliant decision. And I mean, people spend years in training, and you learned some of your techniques watching YouTube as well, and then you worked your way up. Would you recommend that route to others, or would you recommend that they all actually do go to culinary school?
I've worked with chefs, and I've met chefs from both backgrounds. Some of my closest friends are chefs who've worked in the same sort of scene as myself, where they work their way up. They don't do the culinary side of it. But obviously last year I actually worked at Bath College as well as a lecturer, and you do get a lot of good students come through that route. I wouldn't, there's pros and cons for both, really. I suppose if I'm working with college kids, I say stick in college, but if I'm working in kitchens, then obviously I've worked with some 16, 17-year-olds in kitchens recently who aren't going to college, but they are. I think it's hard because obviously you learn the correct way in college, but I think in the kitchen you learn the proper way, so to speak. In college, you get given potentially 3 hours to make one soup, for example. Whereas obviously, as you know, in a kitchen, you've got 3 hours to do 10 different jobs at the same time. Yeah. So I think it teaches you different things. It teaches you the right way, but it also teaches you the proper way as well. So for myself, I wouldn't change the way I did it. That's for sure. I actually, if anything, I probably wish I could go back to when I was 16 when I left school and just get straight into pastry, that side of it. Right. I see it as I've probably lost 10 years. Obviously, I started being a pastry chef about 26, 27. I wish I could go back and gain those 10 years experience and obviously see where I would be now myself. So that's my honest opinion anyway.
Well, you're still really young, and you set up your own company, Edible Art Patisserie. What does that do? Tell us about it.
Well, my company, it was set up as a way to basically, it sounds really bad, but tax obviously my income from obviously consultancy, working in kitchens, classes I was getting asked to do, as well as appearances at colleges. And I found it easier, rather than trying to invoice sort of separately. I thought if I set up a company, get myself a good accountant, then it would obviously be a stepping stone onto potential expansion, which obviously worked with the book sales. And obviously I make money now from merchandise, book sales, consultancy, classes internationally, as well as in the UK. Mm-hmm. And most recently, obviously, the setup of the patisserie side of things. So it's the company does a lot of things, but if anything, I'm trying to obviously make it a brand, as well as obviously it's not just myself. There's actually a brand. There's people who work with me behind the scenes as well. So that's what it does, really. So.
And you were planning on opening your flagship patisserie this year. Has the current crisis affected your timings?
No, it's actually sped things up. Basically, I was consulting for a place in North Devon, which financially they hit difficulties in mid-February anyway. So that was a bit of a shock to the system. And obviously with the coronavirus crisis, obviously the whole hospitality industry shut down about a month later. Yeah. I've actually, rather than sitting in self-pity and waking up at 1 PM, which I did for the first few weeks, I actually took some advice from my accountant, obviously spoke to my bank, and I'm actually any minute now waiting on an email to confirm that the lease agreement for a shop I've actually found in Montpellier and Cheltenham is actually going to be finalised. So I actually plan on opening on August the 1st, Saturday,
Oh, wow.
pending obviously any sort of second peaks in obviously the coronavirus cases. So that's fingers crossed for all of that. But yeah, basically equipment, packaging, everything's been sourced now.
Yeah.
I'm putting money into that and basically hoping for the best. I'm seeing it as sort of like it's now or never, so to speak. I know it's probably quite risky opening up a business off the back of this, but at the same time, patisserie as well as people need to eat all the time anyway. So people, if they want to, people are going to be hopefully climbing the walls to try and get out and have some fun. So we're following obviously all the guidelines, working with companies like Pastry and stuff to get all the correct perspex sheets in place to make it social distance. Obviously, one in, one out. Takeaway is the main side of it anyway. So we're working hard. Obviously, there's a lot of planning involved, so it's quite stressful, but it hopefully should be worth it.
Yeah, well, it's quite nice to hear that it's had a little bit of a positive effect on your business. What are the other effects that it's had on your business?
Obviously, the negative side of it, in terms of it does. I don't care what anyone tells you. The best pastry chefs and best chefs in the world will tell you that when this sort of situation hits, it does stunt your creativity and your motivation as well. Like there's some days where you wake up, there's nothing to do. It's obviously up until last week where we weren't allowed out basically at all. Yeah. There's some days you wake up, your alarm will go off, and you think, what is the point in getting up, getting ready just to go sit in the living room and put the TV on, so to speak? Yeah. The negative side of it would be it is mentally draining, which is probably why I actually took the decision to try and throw myself into the patisserie. Because as you're probably aware, it's everything from packaging to seats to like this morning I was looking at licensing for playing music inside the venue. So it's everything involved, that side of it. So that was the positive side of it. But the negative side was spending probably about 2 months where you wish you could just be in the kitchen, basically. There's not a lot you can do. There's only so much home baking or selling books and stuff you can do to keep yourself occupied. Obviously, every chef needs to keep an income coming in, as well as obviously keep their mental health obviously on track as well. So that was the damning side of it anyway.
So you weren't able to sell anything online then, because I know a lot of businesses selling their products online now.
Yeah, the facilities I had access to. Basically, obviously, I'm still on site where I was consulting currently until I relocate to Cheltenham in June, where obviously, unfortunately, I have access to the kitchen. But in terms, I filmed an online class here, but in terms of actually producing stuff to sell, I didn't want to push my luck or break guidelines, where in the fact that we didn't actually have the food safety standards in place due to the company going insolvent, basically. Obviously, all the certificates and qualifications, that side of it, to actually have legalised food safety. There wasn't no sort of way I could get around that without obviously pulling the wool over people's eyes, basically. I didn't want to sell products out of a kitchen, which technically, as clean as it is, there is no stipulations or certification in place where I can sell. And unfortunately, where I'm based, the clientele and the geographical location there's probably about 10 people within a mile radius. So it's not actually the most, it's not like a door-to-door sort of thing I could do either. In terms of merchandise and selling online, also my e-commerce sales from the clothing to the book sales and the online classes, that's what's been keeping me going. So I'm grateful to my followers for that sort of support during this time, because people are still spending money although they're not earning it. So you have to be grateful for that as well. So.
Absolutely. And I mean, you run your courses across Europe. You mentioned that as well earlier on. Yeah. You've got one coming up in Spain in September. Are you waiting to see how the situation changes before you go ahead, or are you just going with it?
We're playing it by ear. I'm quite lucky in the fact that the Spain one is obviously a lot of people might not know how these classes work. They see all these chefs globe trotting like Antonio Bachor and Cedric Relay. These people.
Yeah, it looks great.
A lot of the time I think you also get paid a fee for your time. But some of my classes, like I've got one in Amsterdam in August 14th and 15th, or 15th, 16th, sorry. I think I've actually planned my classes quite luckily, basically. There's no skill involved, where my last class was in March 8th and 9th, I believe, which was in Amsterdam. And that's actually when we was in the airport coming back on the Sunday. There was a lot of, obviously, face masks around then. This was just before, obviously, it hit, the UK. And it was very sort of touch and go then. But my next class is in August, like I said there, and then obviously September in Spain. And the one in August in the Netherlands, I've been told and reassured that it will go ahead. They've eased their restrictions, and I think they've got limits on, 50 people or more, which obviously the class only 14 people maximum. The one in Spain, up until last night, the venue was still advertising. So, but it's a challenging time because a lot of these chefs obviously have lost classes during these times where they see probably chefs like myself and others online where you think you've got a bottomless pit of money, where like, you're talking thousands of pounds a time. If it gets cancelled, it's like a month's salary is basically gone. So at the minute, all you can do is hope for the best, sell the spaces, and bear in mind that you may have to potentially refund those classes. Obviously, spaces that 100% if it does get cancelled, and obviously that could ride right up until the day or 2 days before the class. So that's the challenging part of it. The flights and accommodation are all booked, so it's a bit hard.
And there is always a risk of a potential second wave. I mean, could you convert these classes online if the situation doesn't change?
There's always that possibility, but I think these classes were 2 and 3 days respectively. I think because they're such hands-on classes and not demonstrations, I think the only option we'd go for is either cancel it and offer a refund, or hopefully postpone it and offer a date for the future. The venue I'm going to in Spain, obviously they usually have 2 chefs every month at least, and they've cancelled probably about 6, 8, 10 classes since it started. Obviously in Spain it hit quite soon, and I know they've actually rescheduled the classes for October, November, December time. So I'm quite positive or optimistic that if it does get cancelled, obviously a reschedule would be the option. If people obviously couldn't attend those classes for whatever reason, then a refund would obviously be offered. So.
And what's the skill level required to go onto one of your courses?
Well, that's the thing. My classes, I'm quite proud. I try and market them to anyone. I've actually had a class recently where I actually had a quarter-finalist from MasterChef UK professionals, and I also had a person who does the checkouts in Tesco's working simultaneously side by side. The classes are all sort of worked from the book at the minute, so everyone gets a copy of the book. They follow the methods, instructions. If it's like a 2-day class, for example, we usually do the first day of prep, and then the second day the whole class works together. No matter what they've prepped, really, just finishing and garnishing the items ready for obviously a display at the end, where at the end of it they get to take as much as they can carry home, basically.
Right.
So there's no sort of limitations. Some people obviously feel a bit nervous when they're obviously inquiring if they've got no experience, but so you don't get the experience unless you get stuck in, I believe, anyway. So it's always a friendly atmosphere. There's never been a situation, touch wood, where there's been a chef who's a bit arrogant or gets fed up with the pace if it's too slow for them because they've got a higher skill set. I'm quite proud of the fact that a lot of my classes in the UK before I even went abroad to Europe was a lot of you've got a Bake Off Professionals, for example, on I think it was at Channel 4 now. I think for every series, apart from obviously the first 2, I think I've known at least 3, 4, 5 people from the series who've actually come to my classes. So it's quite good. There's quite a mixed, varied ability, which is obviously it makes for an entertaining class, and also you don't feel like you're patronising people when you're teaching them how to temper chocolate, for example.
Right.
It's always a main concern in my mind. I don't want to bore anyone and think that I'm babysitting them, so to speak. So.
Of course. Well, it sounds like fun. So you're actually a member of the Valrhona Circle V. How has that helped you?
Well, obviously Valrhona chocolate is, I'm not just saying this for that reason, but it's always been my favourite sort of brand. It's always been, when I was teaching myself patisserie or looking at the chefs I idolised, I was always, in awe of obviously the chocolates they got to use and stuff. And obviously everyone knows Valrhona is financially probably not the most viable for a lot of businesses. Obviously that's a fact, but I genuinely believe obviously you pay for what you get. It's helped me in the fact that they've supported obviously the book. They supported my project there, where they provided me with whatever chocolate I needed. And they support obviously everyday sort of business needs. I've done chocolate classes where it's been Valrhona primarily. It's benefited me in the fact that I get to work with obviously the best chocolate on the market. I genuinely believe. Whereas I'm quite probably outspoken if they wouldn't like it, but if I didn't rate the product, one, I wouldn't work with them anyway. I'm not the sort of person just to take freebies or support someone just for financial or social media gain. If I didn't like the product, I wouldn't work with it anyway. So that's the way I see it.
And what other quality ingredients do you swear by?
To be honest, I'm quite old-fashioned in the sense that I'm not into the molecular side of it. You get obviously the additives or the foaming agents. I'm not a massive fan of that. I just swear by good quality ingredients. That vanilla, for example. There's so many different types. You can get your supermarket bought vanilla pods, or I prefer to use like Tahitian vanilla or Mexican vanilla essence and stuff like that. It's just, I think if you're going to use like chocolate, for example, if you had a chocolate brownie and you used like a supermarket own brand chocolate, or you used something like Barona, it's only going to taste as good as the products you put in. That's what I stand by. Same with, right down to the eggs as well. I try to use pasteurized egg products from good local suppliers. It can make or break. Your macarons, for example, literally, make or break them. So
yeah. And what is the concept to creation process that you follow?
It's quite weird for myself. When I first started, I used to get inspiration most of the time when I was driving. So I think I've clocked up about 40,000 miles in my car in the last 18 months. So a lot of the times they'd come to you when you're driving, and you have to try and remember it. Or there was times when I was actually sleeping with a notepad next to my book, where I just wake up one random time in the night with a weird idea, which probably wouldn't work, but sometimes they did, and then obviously jot it down. Sometimes I end up visualizing the product before actually completely cement the components inside, which is probably the wrong way around. But for pastry, I believe it's just as good as it looks. Obviously, it has to taste amazing, but it has to look, have that wow factor as well. So there's been times where I've had an idea of how I want something to look without even having an idea of what flavour is going to be inside.
Oh, wow.
It's probably completely the wrong way around, and people will argue that's the wrong way to do it. But that, I suppose, when you're working with companies like Pavoni and all these different companies who offer all these different these silicon molds and all these different things you can get nowadays on the market, I believe you get the image before you actually probably cement the flavour concept. That's the challenging part of it, I suppose.
And how much of it do you see as a science?
Pastry is obviously people would say it's a science. It depends obviously how deep you delve into the molecular side of it. For myself, it's a science I say, it's quite worrying, I say pastry is probably one of the easiest sections in the kitchen if you just follow the ingredients and follow the recipes and methods. I find a lot of, I call them hot side chefs, obviously they love to learn pastry, but when you're obviously making a sauce, you add a bit of this, add a little bit of that, take away a bit of this. In pastry, if it says 115 grams and you pour 122, 123 in there, you're running the risk of it not working. So there's a science involved where if you just follow what's written in front of you, or follow what you're told, I think it can be quite easily learned, so to speak. But it's just the timing, I think. With macarons, for example, you have to follow the method, put them in the oven and wait for them to cook. If you get too impatient and take them out, then they're not going to work. I think that's what a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah. Is that the recipe that you shared on Instagram the other day?
Yeah,
French
definitely.
macarons. Yeah, they looked amazing.
Good. I'm glad. French macarons aren't my favourite way to make them, ironically. So I was actually filming a class which actually didn't get put up. I decided to give the recipes away.
Right.
And when I was obviously penciling out the itinerary for the class, I realised that I hadn't actually made French style macarons for about 2 years. So I just obviously swear by the Italian meringue method. So I was thinking, I'm filming this class and I'm making these macarons. I didn't even have a tester first. I thought, if they don't work, I'm going to look like a bit of an idiot here. But luckily, instinct kicked in and they worked quite well. So.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely. Well, they look like they work. They look brilliant. So, do you? You mentioned the molds earlier on. Do you create your own molds, or do you get standard ones?
I work quite closely with Pavoni, obviously based in Italy. They supported the project as well. But recently, and late last year, I actually worked with a company called Macu Formbox. So they actually had a Kickstarter campaign where they actually built their own thermoforming machine. And they've actually supported me quite a bit through the project as well. There's a few molds within the book which have been made basically where I made like a cherry mold where you basically sat a load of cherries on top of the board and basically just press down. It's a machine which works with a standard Hoover basically. It heats up basically a sheet ready for thermoforming, a solid plastic sheet. And when it pushes down, the vacuum sucks out the excess air and creates your mold. And it's like a standard sort of Easter egg mold. So they're not solid, obviously polycarbonate, but they work really, really well. And I'm actually planning on working with them a lot more for the next book. I want to step away from the more commercial molds a bit more, because they are becoming oversaturated.
Yeah.
But they're such easily accessible now. They're very good value for money. But I think when it comes to, let's say, the creative process, if you're trying to think of an idea, there's always things, if I look through the book, there's things I would change slightly, but there was just not a mold available for me to create that sort of image. Whereas obviously now with their support and their guidance, they obviously 3D printing any sort of shape and any idea I have to help create obviously the vision inside my head. So that's a bonus.
That's brilliant. So will they be giving you one of those machines?
they gave me one of the machines. I'm quite lucky to actually receive one of the machines last year. So I've used that quite a bit for a few of the projects. But I think I found the problem. I spoke to Ben, the founder, and I said to him, the problem is when you don't have the machine, you have all these ideas of what molds you wish you could create in your mind. But when you have it sat in front of you, your mind just goes blank. It's like you've got the tools and the ability to create whatever's in your mind, but you don't know where to start. That's the challenging part. So obviously with they actually have a support group as well. So they use a group of people called their ambassadors. They've got a few chefs involved and chocolatiers. So they actually help try and dig out what's inside your brain and put it obviously into a mold form.
That is so interesting.
Yeah, it's good. They're good people. Like I said, I was lucky enough to get the machine. I think the machine's actually now stocked. They're doing really well as a company. Like I said, they started up as a Kickstarter, and I think they're now stocked on companies like Keylink and I believe Home Chocolate Factory may stock them, but they're quite well known now. And like I say, it gives everyone the ability then to create whatever they want, as opposed to having to just buy what's on the market.
So you've had huge success on social media. Yeah. What is your secret?
I don't know. I think I think it's actually just boring people with posts about 2 or 3 times a day. If they see your posts all the time, they're going to take notice eventually. And like I said, a few chefs have asked me how do they pick up their followers. And I said it sounds horrible, I suppose, but I think if a chef put up a video or a picture of him filleting a venison saddle on a red chopping board, I think people would rather look at someone making a macaron or making chocolates. I think it's more visually appealing pastry. And no matter what you do in pastry, I think it's photo worthy, whether it's just melting chocolate or going up making an entremet, for example. But I think in other chefs, I think it's quite hard if you're making a beurre blanc, for example. It is considered quite boring sometimes, which sounds horrible, but that's what it is.
Well, your Instagram game it's really, really strong, and it's just within a short amount of time, right? Since
it is,
2018. So would you say it's all about marketing or hashtags?
I don't tend to use hashtags anymore. I did use it at the start, but I believe once you get to a certain amount of followers, I think as long as it's organic, if it's organic followers, which if you don't, people pay for the followers or that sort of stuff, I don't think that works because you get a lot of fake followers, robots, so to speak. But if it's all organic, then I think once you pick up a few likes, obviously it starts going into search bars and all those different sort of places where they start trending, so to speak. But I think all my books were sold via social media, and it was released in October last year, and it's sold in 39 countries.
Amazing.
Which is I couldn't believe it when genuinely people say you're being modest or you're just saying it, but when the book was first produced, I genuinely believed that I'd be sitting on boxes of the book, using it as furniture in the house. I didn't expect to sell in 5 countries, let alone 39. Like, it's quite humbling, and it's quite a weird feeling to know that the book is sold in countries which I'll never even visit. So that's quite weird in itself.
Well, it's amazing. You're being an inspiration to so many people out there. So that's fabulous.
It's good. Yeah, it's a weird feeling. You don't get used to it anyway. That's for sure. Like I said, when I do these classes in like Amsterdam and stuff, people ask you to sign the book or take a photo with them, and that's not on my radar yet. So my first instinct is to ask them why. So, why do you want the picture? Why do you want me to sign a book? But it is flattering. People's comments saying about the inspirational side of it. It's quite nice.
Yeah. So I've seen your collaboration with Puma, and you designed a gorgeous pair of trainers. How did that collaboration come about?
Well, anyone who knows my social media will see I obviously own quite a lot of Puma trainers myself, and I'm quite OCD with them in the sense that I wear probably 3 pairs a day, take them off so they don't get dirty. If they get dirty, I'll obviously baby wipe them off. And I think I just approached Puma basically and said, basically the new book's coming out. I want to make use of obviously the shoes and stuff with like product placement and stuff, which sounds really, this is obviously behind the scenes sort of stuff where people don't see it, where if you want to get some sort of endorsement deal like this, you have to just approach and say, I'm willing to use your products in the book. What can you do for me, basically? And I basically asked them if I could have permission to customize shoes, and obviously with my own branding. So that obviously a conversation took place, and the result is obviously what you've seen on social media. So I'm quite lucky with that, but now I've just got to be careful with what I want to wear. If I want to keep them on side, obviously I don't want to be sat here on camera to you wearing like an Adidas jumper, for example, because I don't think people would appreciate that too much. So that's why I'm sat here in an edible art jumper, just to keep it nice and PC.
Yeah, and it's got the same design as on the shoes.
It has,
So,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
If anyone wants to buy the shoes, how can they do that?
They're all available on my website, so it's edibleartpatisserie.com. The website actually has access to all the online classes. The book's exclusively available on there as well, and obviously the a little bit about myself and classes upcoming as well, hands-on classes. So everything tends to be on there. It's like it sort of acts like a CV, so to speak. It's like a portfolio of what's coming up and what has happened, and obviously with the patisserie coming up as well, we'll have a lot more on there. Obviously, as we go into the refurbishing, the decorating side of it as well. So
right, and so far in your career, what's the biggest challenge that you've had to face?
I think it's probably being taken seriously sometimes. In terms of my style is very sort of American. People say it's very American patisserie, where I think that's paramount in my followers. Obviously, on my account, because it's set up as a business, I get the insights. And out of the 76,000 followers, I think 6% are from the UK, and I'm working on 10% are from United States and 5% from Brazil. So my followers are primarily American anyway. And the book has sold most copies in the USA as opposed to the UK, which is surprising. So I think for this, working in the UK, I think a lot of it is my style, where I've had a lot of chefs say it's very patisserie orientated, my desserts, and not so much a plated dessert, which has always been my aim anyway. I took it as a compliment, which is why I'm obviously opening a patisserie. That's always been my goal. So I think my challenge has sort of been turning the conceptions or what the head chefs in the UK expect on their menu, and trying to convince them into maybe siding with or accepting what I want to put on there, which, to be fair, I've had no complaints so far. We've had a few murmurs and stuff at the start, but once the customer's got the desserts, hopefully that spoke volumes in itself. So
yeah. So you run courses, you have your own book, you're inspiring many other people. I mean, let's talk about your book for a second. How much time did it take to produce it?
Well, this is the funny thing. People ask me this all the time, and I thought when I agreed to do the book, it would be a really nice, easy project, and it would just be like a glorified recipe book for myself more than anything else. But I started the book probably. Some of the pictures within the book were taken by my photographer JP back in November, December 2018, and the book had to be finalised, ready for publishing. It was released on Monday, the 28th of October last year. So you're talking, it was a good year, and I was close to the deadline as well. It took a good 10 months in front of a laptop, from either getting the photos or writing, formatting. I think I clocked up a good 6 hours trying to decide on the page thickness of the book and also the fonts used on the front cover. It wasn't as easy as I thought. So if anyone planning to write a book, I'd say go for it, but don't underestimate it. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, with a new book, I want to try and double the size of it in terms of page number. And anyone who's seen my book or have my book, I try to keep it as accessible. I'm not a fan of producing a 300-page book and having the same image on 4 pages for the same recipe. It is as simple as it's a double-page spread of the image, and then the next 2 pages are the recipe and method. So it is quite compact, but yeah, it was a lot of effort. It probably took about a year in total, from agreeing to do it to obviously getting it out there, available for people to purchase. It's not too bad when you think about it, but when I was sat in front of a laptop stressing, it seemed a lot longer. Trust me, it did.
Yeah. And what's the difference between, I mean, because you've got a deluxe version as well.
Yeah.
What's the difference between that one and the regular one?
The deluxe version was put forward to me by the publisher, saying it'd be a good idea to, obviously, as an interim between this book and potentially the new book coming out probably mid-2021 now. It's a good interim idea. So I had a few ideas I wanted to include in the new book, but I wanted to get them out there now, as opposed to, it's the same with a lot of things, I suppose. If you're a fashion designer or whatever, I didn't want to sit on these ideas and then see another chef have done that and think it now looks like you're obviously imitated. So I thought it'd be a good idea to come up with another 12 recipes and basically get them photographed by JP, which happened again just before. We were literally 2 days before the lockdown actually started, in the photo shoots. We just got into that just okay. It was just an idea to obviously boost the book by 25%, include more recipes and methods, which I wish I included in the original one, and basically get them out there. So I didn't have to sit on them potentially for another year, basically. So I really wanted to get them out to the public now. But at the same time, I thought that a lot of chefs obviously are concerned that maybe you sit on something too long and someone else is going to jump in and take your idea, so to speak. Which is that's the paranoid mind of a pastry chef, which is I think a lot of pastry chefs have that sort of OCD paranoid state of mind. So it can be healthy when used correctly. That's all I say about it.
Yeah, I don't think that's exclusive to pastry chefs, though.
No,
I think there are a lot of people that feel that way.
Yeah, it's the whole control side of things, I believe, and perfectionist. Like a lot of patients like myself, I look through the book now and there's certain things you wish you could change, but I suppose that's a good sign. If you're complacent and content to sit back on what you've got, then I don't think you'll ever grow as a person as well as a professional in its own right. So
do you think that you'll do another book in the future?
Well, there's a new book which has been agreed already. It's going to be called Breaking the Mould. Breaking the Mould is going to be called, coming out in 2021.
Amazing.
I said, the idea for the book came quite soon after this one, but I wanted to step away from more commercial molds, where Pavoni will still be a part of it, and I'll be using their products obviously as well. But I wanted to obviously capitalise on the ability to obviously make my own molds now. And the idea was put forward to my Instagram followers to come up with a name for the book. And I chose Breaking the Mould because it fits in perfectly, where probably myself, I don't probably conform to what people expect for the traditional side of coming up to be a pastry chef, but also the fact that I want to obviously step away from the silicone mold side of things as well. So that's going to be coming out 2021, where it would be started now in terms of the photography side of it. Obviously my photographer, social distancing, it is very hard to obviously prepare, distribute and obviously photograph the items, in person, so to speak.
Yeah. So what inspires you for new recipes?
It could be anything. It could be, it sounds cheesy and cliche, but anything like nature or smells, flavors. A lot of my ideas actually come from sweets. Haribo or chocolate bars. Any flavors which I like growing up, I try and remember how they taste and to put them into something else. I'm not a massive fan. You'll rarely see me sitting there, and it sounds really bad, eating, say, fresh fruit, for example. Right. I like for strawberries, for example. I don't like the idea of us eating strawberries as they are. I'm quite weird like that. I've got probably a really bad diet like most chefs. But the strawberry, which I've got in the book, for example, like a compote inside a chocolate sort of whipped ganache, that appeals to me a lot more, where I'm probably adding a lot more sugar into the recipe, but you're still getting your fresh fruit and that sort of thing. I like to turn natural items into something which is probably a bit more fun to look at and a bit more visually appealing to eat as well. So, but a lot of my inspiration comes from things like that, and obviously the chefs I follow. I don't follow a mass amount of chefs, where I've always been under the concept of trying to be a master of one trade as opposed to a jack of all, so to speak. So in terms of pastry, I only follow a handful of chefs. So my inspiration comes a lot from them, and I've been quite lucky when I started my Instagram. It's a true story. My first ever follower, so I put up a post of a new book I got, and it was the Bashaw chocolate book, and I just tagged them in it. And it's ironic, my first ever comment, like, and follow was actually Antonio Bashaw.
Oh wow!
Which is really weird. Obviously, I was lucky enough to. I did some work with him in London when he came to the country a couple of years ago now, and ever since then, obviously, he wrote the foreword for my book. He's always been there, like whether it's WhatsApp or on Instagram. So he's been a very good mentor of mine, and obviously I admire everything he does. And a lot of people say, someone said it's an insult once, like, "Oh, you're just like the UK Antonio Bashaw." I said, "I'll take that any day of the week." Same with someone said the food you do, you're trying to imitate, or it looks like Cedric Goulet's work. I said, I'll take that as well. I said, look, imitation is the best form of flattery. I tried to obviously do my own thing, but if people are trying to put me in the same category as those two chefs who are my idols, then that's not an insult to me. I'll take that any day of the week. So.
Yeah, I see that as a compliment as well. I think it's
brilliant. Yeah, definitely.
And do you ever come down to London and visit restaurants and check out the dessert scene over here?
Not so much anymore. My family live in Essex, East London, Essex area. I'm up there. It was quite frequently before, obviously, the lockdown situation. But in terms of London itself, I'm not that familiar with the scene. Also, I've got a lot of friends and people who I speak to who work and live in and around London. But with the work I do and the amount I travel, I don't actually manage to get out as much as I wish I could. The Southwest food scene, actually down in Southwest England, with the likes of with the Michelin-starred chefs down in this area and the top restaurants, everyone knows everyone down here as well. Like the whole industry, everyone knows everyone anyway. But I would like to get out more in London. So there's a lot of nice. I was talking to his name's Chop Barry, I believe. He did the Chocolate Masters for the UK in 2017. He actually popped up on my Instagram the other day offering advice with the patisserie, because he's got his I think it's called the Cocoa Lab business in London. He sells obviously his chocolates, and he was saying to me about he was a bit envious, obviously my place in Cheltenham, which I'm going to obviously open a patisserie, because he was looking in the area himself last year. Obviously now other commitments have rendered that not possible. So everyone's friendly. I just feel I talk to a lot of people in London, but I don't actually go, so which is probably quite bad. But I would like to make more time. When I'm in Cheltenham, obviously it's not so far away as where I am now. So I would obviously like to do that a lot more.
Yeah. So as well as you've got the patisserie, you've got a new book coming up. What can we look forward to seeing next from you?
Well, so the patisserie is going to take a lot of my time, and I will treat that like a child, basically. That's going to be my sort of platform to do whatever I want, what's in my mind. Where I'm also grateful to the chefs who hired me as a consultant, most recently at the Michael Caine's Coach House in North Devon. But you know, your ideas are always well received, but sometimes you need to make a couple of adjustments every now and then. But with the patisserie, obviously, that's solely I get to do what I want to do. If it doesn't sell, then that's on me, basically. But apart from that, obviously, the new book, which we'll start work on as soon as possible, that's what I'm most excited about, as well as obviously the patisserie, as well as the classes as well. Because I was in line for, obviously I got the one in Amsterdam, one in Spain, but I was also speaking to places in Canada and Indonesia as well just before. So I'd like to start doing more of that. Although I've always said I wouldn't like, the lifestyle you see online with some of the pastry chefs or another chefs traveling around like 2-3 countries a year. Like Bashor, for example, himself, I think he put up last year, he'd been on 119 flights and visited like 47 cities last year alone. As much as that would be amazing, I wouldn't like to, I get homesick quite soon, quite quick. So I wouldn't like that lifestyle. But I would like to see a bit more and obviously go visit places where my book has sold, like Canada, USA, Indonesia. These are all places where my book sold in high numbers. So I'd like to obviously go over there and basically, it sounds about to strike while the iron's hot, really. If there's a demand for it, it seems silly not to go.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. And guys, if you want to feast your eyes on Damien's Edible Art page on Instagram, he's at Damien Wager, and I'm at Posh Nosh Gal. Thanks, Damien. Look forward to the book and the patisserie.
Thank you. Bye now.